we're going to, I guess, begin the recaps of the year that was in all different genres. Today, we're focusing on the top news stories of 2014. And when you try and do it in a top 5, an arduous task, because on a local level, there were many, and obviously on a national, there were many standout stories. Yeah,
it really is tough to kind of take all of the events that have happened over the last 365 days and combine them into a little 4 or 5 minute piece here. So the ones that we found to be the most notable, we're going to go with number 5, being kind of a difficult year for transit, public transit in Metro Vancouver. This all sort of began with a number of system-wide shutdowns that happened during a course of essentially a week in July. TransLink suggesting people go and grab a coffee and avoid to try and take a break from these lengthy delays. So it really shed some light on the lack of an expansion with our current transit system, the outdated equipment, and we're looking forward as well into next year with the potential referendum for expanding the Broadway subway line.
Congestion improvement system, that's going to be a mail-in referendum come spring. The Compass Card program, will it finally be rolled out in 2015? And yeah, when it comes to transparency, the salaries of the executives, many things came under fire, but seeing passengers walk along the tracks, there were big security issues, so hopefully things turn around for TransLink in 2015.
This Compass Card system has really not been rolling out as well as TransLink was wishing it would. So we'll certainly follow that story in the year to come. There's still no sign of missing flight MH370. Of course, this flight was leaving. It disappeared while flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing in March of 2014, and it hasn't been seen since. The last description of this was that it was believed to have crashed in the Indian Ocean. Crews still searching for this, an underwater search expected to continue right through until May, with no sign of this flight or the more than 200 passengers and crew still on board.
And again, one of the most bizarre news stories of the year, calls for conspiracy, the money invested in the searches for the passengers, one of the weirdest ones where just something falls off the map. And when it comes to these news stories, it makes news for a month and then slowly kind of disappears. And when we look back, knowing that there wasn't a resolution, it is a difficult one to comprehend.
Scary one is for sure. Another local story that caused national and international headlines was the protests at Burnaby Mountain and, of course, the drilling that happened with Kinder Morgan and their dispute with the city of Burnaby. This all started back in August when the National Energy Board sided with Kinder Morgan to allow it access to Burnaby Mountain to do some exploratory drilling. A number of people were taken into custody during these demonstrations that happened for a couple of weeks.
And important to have protesters' voices heard in this. We had the president of Kinder Morgan Canada in the BT studio, Ian Anderson. And yes, he did go on a listening tour to hear the complaints and the critiques, but what will change? And obviously, this is a big one for the environment and how it impacts our communities.
The other big story of the year locally that impacted a lot of people and a lot of families was the BC teacher strike. This impacted many people for a number of weeks. It started, of course, at the beginning of the year when a judge ruled the government's decision to take class size language out of the collective agreement is unconstitutional. The union decided to vote 89% in favor of going on strike and essentially walked off the job. School was canceled for the last 2 weeks of June, right through the summertime, and of course we didn't get back into class until an agreement, a tentative agreement, was reached in mid-September, and this situation still isn't over.
Yeah, and it was almost that these two words were on a repeat, the class size and then composition. We kept hearing those, and the BC court set to tackle those issues in 2015. An acrimonious relationship with both sides, the government and BC teachers. There's a 6-year deal in place, but a huge strain on the relationship, and the students ultimately losing 5 weeks of classes.
And I think that there was also a lot of frustration with the story, with the two sides consistently negotiating through the media and not having those face-to-face discussions that happened during the course of the summer. They didn't meet for a number of weeks until a couple of dates at the end of August, but a lot of parents and families out there were wondering, why was this not dealt with during the summer months?
Frustrations were abound. We heard from you in 2014. I think of all the news stories we had, the most feedback we got was surrounding this and the discussions that were had on both sides of it. But, that was a big one on the local scale, but I think across the board in Canada, this one stood out, and it was an important discussion about security measures in our country.
Yeah, we think the number one story for news in 2014 was the tragedy that happened in Ottawa, of course. We're talking about the murder of Corporal Nathan Cirillo. He was shot and killed in front of the National War Memorial by Michael Zahaf-Debeau, who then entered Parliament Hill, and then he was taken down, of course, shot and killed by Sergeant-at-Arms Kevin Vickers. This was just such a shocking story of I think Canadian democracy being violated with violence. You look at how close this story was to Remembrance Day and the turnout in Ottawa on Remembrance Day to honor Corporal Nathan Cirillo and our armed men and women serving all over the world. It was really remarkable.
The response that you see to revive Corporal Nathan Cirillo was inspiring by bystanders of this troubling situation. But the big question in the conversation surrounding security of how someone could get so close in Parliament Hill is going to change, the experience in Ottawa. And then just seeing terror on home soil was shocking. And seeing the likes of Anderson Cooper and international reporters in Ottawa telling a story in Canada that we're used to telling somewhere else around the world, that anything at any time can happen. And it was a scary situation in Ottawa. And I think a lot's going to change with the experience of how people experience Parliament Hill.
Such a sad story and such a high praised young man who was really at the start of his life. He as a young boy, and a real tough story to cover. But yeah, that was the one I think that got the most. We don't normally see that kind of international attention with violence in Canada. It doesn't happen here, and it did. And I think that changed a lot of our views on our security here in Canada.
The national interest and the emotional tribute for a life sacrificed, obviously for the sake of our nation, very powerful in 2014. So let us know what story stood out to you on social media. Top news stories of 2014. Definitely want to get your feedback on that one.